gaming saturation. It's becoming crazier and crazier out there in the market. We just had Victoria on, right, a few weeks ago, and she was telling us about how the week before we had her on, there was 170 games that were released on Steam within a week, right? And this is kind of becoming the average now every week. And it's getting hard for us out there to stand out as game developers. It's also getting harder for gamers to kind of notice the type of games that they usually like, right? It's actually asking them to do more work. What's your feeling on that? It has to deal with the age groups that they're trying to target, but also finding the right game is just becoming a lot tougher on both sides.
I think that the industry is always going to keep expanding. I think that as game developers, like the collective consciousness will figure out ways to hit on niches that you haven't really thought of before, how to appeal to certain demographics that haven't been appealed to before. I'm just talking in generalities. I think you're talking about saturation within certain bands of target audience. So I think in general, the number of games that are going to come out is always going to increase. I think I read some article somewhere that people over 50 are not a tapped audience yet. And I could actually see there being many games that try to appeal to gamers who are 50 and up. I myself am going to turn 50 and up at some point, and I would love to have games that are more, I guess, mature or whatever, right? But getting to your point, I think that it is going to get harder and harder for game developers to sort of stand out. As an indie developer, I think that the challenge is it's actually kind of a welcome thing for me. I don't really think about how many games are coming out every year. I just try to make sure that I've thought through all of my product planning. I've thought about what people kind of want to see in the future, I really don't know where all these new games are coming from, like what type of new games are coming out. Is it mostly on console, or is it mostly on PC? Is it mostly indie? I'm not quite sure. But to me, it's nice to hear that people are always willing to make games, and it really does help push the entire industry forward. But yeah, we kind of talked about this at the beginning of your podcast that that additional pressure, that desire to stand out is going to lead to developers overworking themselves, and producers and executive teams wanting to go over the top, and that's going to lead to overtime and whatnot. So whatever.
How about you, Ray? You're meeting with a lot of these types. So you're part of the problem, but I'm also want your opinion about. What realistically? I feel like it's increasingly becoming this, right? A lot more gamer, or at least awareness, are becoming game developers. A lot more accessibility to actually go out there and present your ideas to the world. And so I don't really see it slowing down as much.
Yeah, I see it as a good thing, though. I see it as a good thing for, I think, lowering the bar for entry and letting all voices be heard is a good thing, right? I'll make it about race and diversity a little bit, where underrepresented creators, it opens the door for them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Being able to make games easily and cheaply, right? But then when it gets to the point of trying to capture the public's attention and be selling games, I think that's just media right now, right? If I go on Netflix right now, I have nothing but choice of what movie to watch. I have nothing but choice of what video game to play. I have nothing but choice for what book to read, what music to listen to. There's just so much content being produced generally across all segments of the entertainment industry. But that just is a sign that it's growing, and competitions will get fierce. And it also means that people are going to really be making good stuff so that they can stand out.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think it overall is a great thing that people are having a lot of choices, and it just comes down to the individual or your team to kind of really appeal to their audience and just bring it upon their shoulder. And as long as it's fair competition, I think everything's all game and fun.
It's not fair competition. You already know that.
Well, fair enough that if you really
the money, right? You get noticed.
Sure, but I think there's enough on both sides that you can hear at least once in a while, like a game that is a sole developer is able to kind of break it through. As long as you keep hearing stories like that, it gives you at least an ounce of hope. If it's just like Call of Duty every year and Battlefield every year, that's dominating. Well, they are dominating the headlines. And that's all you hear year round, then I think it is pretty hopeless for the little guy to make it through. But I think last 2 years, or increasingly so, we're starting to hear more and more about these smaller teams just prevailing through all that and actually providing a nice contrast for the gamers to kind of choose from.
Well, what I'm hearing, what I see is like, smaller indie teams, right? But a lot of those smaller indie teams are backed by indie publishers that have 10 other games under their belt, and they have the connections to get all the websites to pay attention to these indie games and hype them up.
Don't be hating, man. Don't be hating, man. That's good homework.
I mean, I'm not hating at all. I'm not hating at all, but let's just be real.
Ray's 100% right. I mean, part of like what. Since the last time I was on the show, Brandon, and talking about doing indie dev, like, I'm gonna be talking to Victoria like in a couple days about like marketing on a $0 budget, and then reaching out to a couple publishers to help out with marketing. I'm gonna talk to someone else that I know to help out with like doing Kickstarter, and then it's like as Ray said, like that a lot of that comes intuitively to me because I've worked in the industry in big corporations. So I just know like, hey, you need like a marketing budget behind it. And I think that, yes, there's more games coming out, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to do things any differently. I still think that if you are smart with how you do things, if you use your resources wisely, if you use your connections wisely, you can stand out. And there's a part of me that, always believes, at least this is my thesis on doing R&D game, that focusing on quality of the experience and then doing the right steps and then maintaining, like building your brand as a studio as being like honest and transparent and that you're trying to deliver good value should work. I hope it does. But yeah, you're right. Like there's also unfair competition out there that like part of the reason why I do indie is to slide under it. Like I'm not going to try and fight like Blizzard or Riot toe to toe. There's absolutely no way that that's going to happen. Maybe like 15 years ago you could, but there was kinds of like, like you said, the market's saturated and people have figured out like pretty much almost every monetization model out there with like, even just like the data that helps you point and predict to the next monetization model. By the way, that's subscriptions. Those are things that like people are just more aware of nowadays than it was like a while ago.